What's up guys? Today I have another video for you. It's on this right here. This is a Visconti traveling ink pot. Right off the bat, I do want to say that I feel like some sort of traveling inkwell or ink pot is relatively important for someone who regularly writes with fountain pens. Just because, especially if you have a preference towards pens that write particularly wet, you can really run through ink quite quickly. And obviously, depending on the filling method that your pen is, the ink capacity that you'll have in that pen will vary greatly. Here I have three different pens: Mont Blanc 146, which is a piston filler; TWSBI VAC 700, which is a vacuum filler. This is kind of what most closely represents Visconti's power filler system. And over here is a Waterman Charleston which is a cartridge converter pen. In there I have a converter. This ink pot I got as a set from Visconti's 25th anniversary Homo sapiens MIDI. As you can see on top here, that's kind of what signifies it as the 25th anniversary edition of the ink pot, as well as the pen and the case, which I actually have here. There you go. Normally this is a pretty expensive item. This generally runs for around $70, and there are more expensive variants of it which are like covered in either like metal or like gold-plated steel or whatever. This is the cheapest one that they have, and it's completely made out of plastic. And in all honesty, first impressions, I don't know, I didn't really feel like it was worth the $70 because it's all plastic. And you can see there's some trim. There's a trim ring here. It's not like, I feel like the finish of it isn't that great and it feels kind of cheap. But at the same time, I've been using this for around 2 weeks now, and I really like how well it works. Now in the past, well, by the way, this is also what it came with. It also comes with a glass pipette eyedropper, which I don't really use. I typically use ink syringes, so I use a syringe to fill this as well. I feel like cleaning out the rubber and whatnot on this is kind of a pain, so I don't really bother using it, but it does come with it in case you don't happen to have an ink syringe and you need something to fill this with. In the past, what I've basically used to carry ink around are these. These are small, high-density polyethylene plastic bottles that Nalgene makes. This one happens to be their half fluid ounce size, which is 15 milliliters. Let's see if it'll focus. Come on, focus. There we go. So this one, actually, this particular one that I have filled with 54th Massachusetts, I've been using since I was in college, so it's been several years now. And these are great because they're basically like bomb-proof, bulletproof. Okay, come on, camera, focus, focus. But they're basically like bulletproof. They don't leak. They have a really good seal. They're very crush-resistant. It requires, like, you probably run this over with a car, and it probably won't break. I'm not gonna say it won't break, but basically you'll have no problems just randomly throwing this into a bag and having it, like, if you're a woman and you have a whole pile of stuff, or even if you're a guy and you have like a messenger style bag, which is just like a dump pouch style and doesn't have compartments, I have no problems throwing these in my chrome messenger bags with a bunch of textbooks and all that stuff, and I've yet to have one ever leak or crack or break on me. Another popular method is these. These are 5 milliliter like ink sample vials, and these aren't that bad. These hold like 5 to 6 milliliters, basically around the same as this. Obviously you see these are a lot smaller, but these are difficult to fill from when you get towards the very bottom. When this is completely full, you can basically get a full filling on most pens. You are kind of limited because the diameter opening of this is not that big compared to, say, the Nalgene or the Visconti. But I think in general you won't have any problems fitting a pen into that opening. The biggest problem, as you can see here, is that the seal, I tightened these quite a bit, and there's ink all over the threads, and that's kind of a weak point. I've never actually had one leak on me, but I have had several of these caps crack, and because I feel like it will leak at the threads for me, I'll actually just kind of crank them down, and I've had a few basically just crack right here from pressure. And I mean, in all honesty, I'm sure the body itself is quite durable, but I still don't really trust it all that much, you know, especially compared to like the Nalgene, which I can't really move at all or flex. And you know, while this does have like a cone shape on the bottom that's supposed to kind of help with filling, because most pens have the breather hole towards the section and not at the tip of the nib. You know, I believe Sailor pens you can fill from the breather hole that's on the nib itself. Like on Sailor pens, I believe you can fill from the breather hole here and from the tines in the feed, so you don't have to actually dip the section into ink to actually fill the pen. But in general, most pens you do have to dip the pen up to the section in order to get a full fill properly without air bubbles. And so, you know, having this cone here, as you know, as small as it is, it doesn't really help with getting a full fill without air bubbles. You know, the same goes with this. This obviously has 3 times the ink capacity of the Visconti traveling ink pot, but because you have to dip the pen into it, you know, like this is like the somewhat larger, I believe these are number 5 size nibs. You can see like when you dip it into the ink pot, come on, focus. I should really just use manual focus on this camera. Regardless, there we go. When you dip it in, you can see like the section just barely touches the top 1/3 of this. So you're basically, essentially, in order to get a full fill, you'll be limited to the top third of this 15 milliliters, which is basically 5 milliliters, which is the same as this. And one nice thing about this compared to, say, this Nalgene is that it'll basically fit in most large pen pouches that, you know, you can see here. This will not fit in this pen pouch sleeve, which is made to fit, you know, actually 149 size pens. You can see here it fits the 146 quite comfortably. You know, meanwhile, this will basically just slide right in. So, makes it a little bit easier to carry. And what's nice about it is because it does have less ink capacity than this, because of how you fill with it, it kind of allows you to use as much of the ink as possible out of this container. So basically right here in the syringe right now, I have 5 milliliters of water, which I will squirt into this traveling ink pot. Maybe I had a little less. I probably could have filled it a little more. You see there's the line. This is the line that you should not overfill past, simply because when you stick a pen in here or you close it, it does create some pressure in here, so you do want a little bit of airspace in here. It actually works out that it's not quite filled out to the line because I will actually add a little bit of ink in there, so when I fill the pens, you can actually see. All 3 of these pens are actually clean, and I don't want to necessarily have to go through the process of flushing and wasting fresh ink out of the pens, so I'll just dilute some colored ink into the water so you can see more readily. But as you see here, the sealing method is pretty simple. It's a plastic stopper here that fits into here, and in here is just a conical shaped rubber seal. And that's also the aspect that makes this kind of universal. It's not universal in the sense that it can fit all pens. Certain pens like the Pilot Vanishing Point or really slim pens, or pens like the Lamy Safari that have a strangely shaped section will not make a good seal with this conical rubber tube inside. But any pen with a traditional section that's round, you should have no problems with. And I believe, you know, I don't have a 149, but I believe 149s will fill in this pen as in this ink pot as well, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm a little over. But basically how you fill this is you dip the pen into the ink pot, You make sure that you have a good seal with the rubber cone in there. Then you flip it upside down, and then you just twist the piston in order to get a full fill. Now, I would recommend that, obviously there's air in here, and when you twist the piston all the way up towards the nib, it will push that air into here, and if this is already filled to capacity, and you're not really holding it tight, or if you happen to like let it slip a little bit, you can have basically ink leak out. So, I prefer to actually bring the piston all the way down towards the nib, up towards the nib, whatever, so that you're basically just sucking ink from here, and you're not, whatever, I'll clean the surface later, and you're not pushing more air into here. So basically you just kind of push it in snug. Then important key thing is to actually hold it relatively tightly, and you just twist the piston. If you want, since this pen was empty, probably some air in the feed that you want to get rid of, so you just twice flip it back upside down. Come on. There we go. And you pull that, and you've basically got a full fill in there. This is a 80s variant 146 with a perfectly clear ink window. Of course, you won't really be able to see anything. There's a very slight air bubble in there, but not that huge of an air bubble. I'm sure you could cycle the ink through a few times and get rid of the air bubble completely. The nice thing about the ink pot is, because you're not dipping the section into the ink and it's actually sealing up against the top portion of the section, the handle doesn't get super inky. It will get some ink on it because, obviously, especially from the stopper here, the stopper will make contact with the ink, and as you pull the stopper out, that may basically drip ink all along that rubber seal. But as you see here, I wiped it off with a paper towel, and this paper towel is relatively clean. The nice thing about the ink pot is it works really well with the vacuum fillers or Visconti's power filler. One of the most common problems with filling this pen from a traditional ink bottle is that you generally won't get a full fill. You'll probably get like halfway there. And the trick that everyone has learned is that basically after you filled it halfway, you kind of point the nib up, and then you just slowly bring that piston up towards there until you basically see ink start to get towards, start building up at the feed here. And then that's when you dip it into the ink again. Basically, you're taking out as much air from the system as possible. And then if you do it a second time, you'll get a full fill. And it's kind of a little difficult because, obviously if you let it slip or anything, you might push too much ink out or something. But in this case, with the ink pot, because the pen is already upside down and it's basically an enclosed container, you don't have to worry about that. If you're doing it with a power filler, or a vacuum filler, I definitely recommend you hold it, because you're gonna basically be forcing air into here, and if you just leave it dangling, you'll end up having this like kind of rocket off the pen and kind of spill ink all over the place. But basically, you just pump it once, you get a relatively full filling, and then you just bring the piston back down, and then you pump it again. Close that up, turn it back upside down, and then basically you have a completely filled vacuum filler pen. And then again, just wipe the section off. I accidentally brushed the feed up against there, so that's why there's a lot more ink. But it's definitely a lot less ink than you would traditionally get filling from a standard bottle. And then finally, to fill a converter pen, it's basically the same as the piston pen. Obviously, you'll just want to unscrew the body off to reveal the converter. And then just like with the piston, I like to turn it all the way down. Insert it into the pen until I feel that it's snug. Turn this upside down. And fill once. twice. Turn this upside down again. With cartridge converter pens, you do want to be careful because if you just pull on the converter, because that rubber grips against the section so well, you might just end up yanking the converter off the pen, so you want to really get a good hold on it. And just wipe it off. Very little is on the section, and you have a full fill on your converter. And if you plug it back, you can basically see here, it looks like there's like no ink left in there, but if I turn it upside down, there's still a little bit. I'd say there's probably still a good like milliliter of ink left in here. I believe a full fill on a back 700 is 2 milliliters. This converter is probably 1 milliliter or like 3/4 of a milliliter, and a 146 I believe fills like 1.5 to 2 milliliters as well. So you can fill a pen several times off of just 5 milliliters, and basically because the ink, when you have everything upside down, the ink basically settles right here, right at the section. You don't waste any ink. You can basically get all the ink out of this ink pot into your pens, while like I mentioned with the other ways, like with the Nalgene bottle, you're always going to have a little bit of ink left over at the bottom of the bottle that you can't necessarily get out with a nib, and you'll have to go with something like an ink syringe to really suck it out. The ink pot also has a section up here that they include like a fiber sponge that gets inserted into there, and that's meant to travel with you so you can wipe off the section clean of ink before you write so you don't get your fingers inky. I took that out. It's not that large, to be honest. You could probably roll up like a small microfiber towel in there and stick it in there as well, and that'll probably hold it in. You can see like it's just kind of part of that plug that plugs into this rubber cone. But it's still handy to have, and the space is there anyway. It's not like it's taking up more room. So just like a demonstration of the ink pot. For $70, the price that, it's a lot of money. Now, like I said, I got this as part of the 25th anniversary set from Visconti, so this and the pen case were free. And, on first inspection, I feel like it's not really worth $70. But if I had to do it again, I would probably go ahead and get it, pay the full $70 for one, because I think it's really handy, and I think it, with care, this will last a long time. And being able to travel around with 5 milliliters of ink is quite a bit. I don't see why your typical person can't write for a few weeks off of one filling of a pen plus another 5 milliliters. Now, obviously, if you're a very heavy-duty writer and you write a lot and you really like wet nibs or flexi nibs, then this may not last as long. But I would imagine it would still last at least a week. Yeah. I guess that's basically... Oh, one thing to note is that... I'm not even sure if these are still made. I heard that Visconti was actually discontinuing the ink pots, and that may be why they were giving them away for free to kind of like blow out their inventory. But you can still find these new stock at several stores online and at some brick and mortars, depending on where you're at. And you do have to be careful about the older versions, because I believe the older versions of the ink pot, instead of having the rubber cone inside, they actually had threads, and what you would do, it would be very similar to Twisby's VAC 20 bottle, or I think that's what they call it, VAC 20 bottle, where they would actually have certain pen styles made for the ink pots, like popular pens like 146s and stuff, and it would basically screw in and thread into the ink pot instead of having that more universal rubber cone in there. So if you do get an older version, you do want to be careful, because those aren't universal, and those will only take the appropriate pens that they're threaded for. But the newer ones, like I said, are relatively universal within reason. You can't have oddly shaped sections or anything, but most standard pens you should have no problems filling with this. So I hope you guys found this video useful. Sorry it kind of took a little longer than I expected for a traveling ink pot video, but hope you guys found it useful. I definitely say check it out. At least, even if you don't want to buy one, I definitely think that if you go to a pen club meeting or something and someone has one and you use it, and you can see that you can use it with relative ease without making a mess if you're just a little bit careful about it, then you'll probably fall in love with it like I have. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thanks